stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit. But in terms of, doing the job and things like that, I don't feel too overwhelmed by that.
In the British monarchy, jewels aren't just jewelry, they're power. And now the Crown's vault has become the latest royal battleground. Palace whispers claim Queen Camilla forced Princess Kate into an impossible choice: step aside and give up her royal tiara. It was meant to stay private, a quiet reminder of the new pecking order. But one person reportedly refused to let it slide: Prince William. Protective of his wife and increasingly unwilling to stay silent, William is said to have stepped in, triggering fresh tensions behind palace walls. Here's the story behind the alleged rivalry, the wedding day dispute, and the moment William reportedly drew a line in the sand. The banquet that started it all. Picture this. It's December 3rd, 2025, and Windsor Castle is dressed to the nines for a state banquet honoring German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier. This is exactly the kind of event where royal fashion gets dissected pixel by pixel the next morning, because state banquets are one of the only occasions where the full set of tiaras comes out of the vault at once. And on this particular night, Kate walked in wearing the Oriental Circlet tiara, a genuinely historic piece, commissioned by Prince Albert for Queen Victoria back in 1853 and dripping in roughly 2,600 diamonds and rubies. Now here's the thing, Kate isn't exactly known for going big with her jewelry. Over more than a decade in the public eye, she's built a reputation for understated, tasteful choices, the kind of look royal commentators describe as classic rather than flashy. So when she showed up in arguably her largest, most attention-grabbing tiara to date, people noticed immediately. Photos circulated within minutes, and royal watchers online were quick to point out just how uncharacteristic the choice was for her. And according to sources who spoke to Radar Online, one person in particular noticed a little too much: Camilla. Insiders claim the Queen felt sidelined by the whole moment. And it wasn't just the tiara in isolation. Kate was reportedly front and center for the entire week surrounding it. Just 2 days after the banquet, she hosted her now famous annual Together at Christmas concert at Westminster Abbey, an event that's become one of the most talked about royal appearances of the holiday season. On top of that, a festive photograph of Kate alongside William from that same stretch of engagements reportedly got significant attention in the press. So in the space of about a week, Kate was the one dominating headlines, dominating photographs, and according to these claims, dominating jewelry too. One insider told Radar Online that Camilla was, quote, furious that Kate wore the enormous tiara at the banquet and viewed it as, quote, yet another obvious move by Kate to steal the spotlight. Buckingham Palace may hide behind their standard no comment, but the tension radiating off these grand halls tells a very different story. Outwardly, it's a dispute over historic diamonds, but inside those gilded rooms, every piece of jewelry is a symbol of rank, legacy, and leverage. Kate and Camilla know the game better than anyone, and neither is willing to be outmaneuvered. The question isn't just whether Camilla pushed too far, it's whether this tiara feud is actually the first crack in a much larger royal war. A pattern of tension. Because here's what's interesting. This wasn't reported as an isolated incident. The claims suggest that Camilla has increasingly felt like she's fighting for her own space in the spotlight, especially as Kate has stepped back into public life following her health journey and returned to a packed schedule of high-profile engagements. Camilla is 78 years old. She waited decades through an entire marriage, a divorce scandal, and years of careful public rehabilitation to finally step into her current role as queen consort. And now, according to these reports, she's watching a princess in her 40s consistently pull focus at nearly every major royal event: banquets, concerts, tours, tiara, and all. It's worth remembering the context, too. Kate spent a significant chunk of the last couple of years out of the public eye entirely, while she focused on her health. When she made her return to full royal duties, it came with an enormous wave of public goodwill and media attention, arguably more than any other member of the family has received in years. From a purely human standpoint, it's not hard to imagine that kind of sustained spotlight creating friction with anyone standing next to her, let alone someone who spent decades working to secure her own footing in the institution. Whether or not the sidelining claims are true, the dynamic itself isn't hard to imagine. It's the kind of tension that plenty of blended or remarried families experience in ordinary life, an older step-parent adjusting to a younger spouse's popularity. Except here it plays out with tiaras, state banquets, and global press coverage instead of a family dinner table. That contrast alone is part of why this story spread so quickly once it surfaced. Royal watchers online reportedly picked apart every frame of footage from that banquet looking for signs of tension between the two women, from where they were seated to how long they spoke to each other, if at all. But according to the reporting, this particular tension didn't stay confined to a banquet hall. It's said to have resurfaced again just months later, this time in an entirely different setting, and pulling William directly into the fight. So what happened next? The wedding tiara standoff. This next part of the story comes from a separate report by IB Times UK, and it centers on a different tiara entirely, one tied to a royal wedding. The bride in question was Harriet Spurling, who was marrying Peter Phillips, the son of Princess Anne. Peter isn't a working royal himself, but he's a genuine part of the family, and William has reportedly always been close with him. The two grew up together and have maintained that relationship into adulthood far more than most of their royal cousins. Ahead of the big day, reports claim Camilla allegedly blocked Spurling's access to a tiara from the royal collection. That collection isn't just a box of accessories sitting around Windsor. It's a carefully managed set of historic pieces, and access to it has traditionally required a level of sign-off befitting a family heirloom worth an enormous amount both financially and symbolically. So when word got out that Camilla had said no, it wasn't received as a small administrative decision. The bride ultimately walked down the aisle wearing a diadem owned by the Pragnell family instead, a beautiful piece in its own right, but notably not from the crown's own vaults. And this is reportedly where William stepped in. According to the outlet, he's said to have been personally invested in making sure his cousin's bride had access to the family jewels, given how close he is with Peter. When Camilla allegedly said no, sources claim William overruled her decision entirely, and that did not go over well. A source told Closer magazine, as cited by IB Times UK, that Camilla is still furious and has accused William of purposely undermining her and breaking protocol. The same source says William doesn't deny stepping in, but believes he was well within his rights to make the call for his cousin's wedding, given the personal relationship involved. Now think about it. This isn't a case of William quietly disagreeing behind closed doors and letting it go. According to these claims, he directly challenged Camilla's decision and got his way. In public, on someone else's wedding day, in front of an extended family that was already watching closely. That's not a small disagreement between in-laws, that's a power move, and everyone in that room reportedly knew it. So how did that actually play out when the two of them had to stand in the same room for the rest of the celebration? An awkward day for everyone. Reports describe the atmosphere between William and Camilla at the wedding itself as, quote, awkward, which, if you think about it, makes total sense. You've got the future king reportedly overriding the current queen consort's decision at a family wedding with photographers and relatives everywhere, and a bride who now has to smile through photos, knowing exactly what went on behind the scenes to get her that different tiara. There's no version of that where things don't feel a little tense for the rest of the day. And this is where the two stories start to connect. Because if Camilla was already reportedly feeling overshadowed by Kate a few months earlier at that state banquet, and then found herself allegedly overruled by William at a wedding not long after, you can start to see a pattern insiders are pointing to. A queen consort who feels like her authority is constantly being tested by the younger generation of the family she married into. First, it's a tiara she has no say over on Kate's head. Then it's a tiara she explicitly says no to, only to be overruled by the future king himself. Whether that's really what's happening or whether it's tabloid speculation, stitching together two unrelated stories into a tidier narrative than reality actually offers is genuinely unclear. Neither Kensington Palace nor Buckingham Palace has confirmed any of these claims publicly, and both stories rest entirely on unnamed sources speaking to entertainment outlets. But taken together, it does raise the obvious question everyone watching this family wants answered. Is William actually taking Kate's side in all of this? Or is he just protecting his own turf and his own relationships regardless of who's involved? Why tiaras matter so much in this family? Before we go any further, it's worth pausing on something that might seem obvious, but actually explains a lot of why these stories caught fire in the first place. Inside the royal family, tiaras are never just accessories. Access to the royal jewelry collection has always functioned as an unofficial signal of status. Historically, tiaras from the vault are only worn by married women in the family, and which specific piece someone is permitted to wear and on what occasion has often been read by royal watchers as a quiet indicator of standing within the family hierarchy. The oriental circlet tiara that Kate wore to that December banquet isn't just old and valuable, it's steeped in symbolism, tracing back to Queen Victoria and the very foundations of the modern monarchy's public image. So when Kate reportedly chose her biggest, most eye-catching piece yet for that particular banquet, it wasn't just a fashion statement in the way an ordinary outfit choice might be. To royal watchers, and according to these reports to Camilla herself, it read as something closer to a declaration. The same logic applies to the wedding tiara dispute. Access to the family's jewelry for someone marrying into the extended family, rather than a direct working royal, has traditionally been treated as a privilege rather than a given. So Camilla allegedly saying no wasn't necessarily about Harriet Sperling personally. It was about maintaining a boundary around who gets access to those pieces and under what circumstances. And that's exactly why William stepping in mattered so much, according to these reports. He wasn't just settling a family squabble about who gets to wear what. He was reportedly overriding a boundary that Camilla considers part of her role to protect. And that's a much bigger deal than a simple disagreement over an accessory. It gets at the heart of who actually holds influence over royal protocol these days, the queen consort or the future king. So with all of that context in mind, what does it actually tell us about where William stands in the middle of it all? Whose side is William really on? Here's where we have to be careful, because the two incidents involve William defending two different people, his wife and his cousin, not necessarily a coordinated stand against Camilla. It's tempting to flatten this into one clean story of William versus Camilla, but the reporting doesn't actually connect the two events directly. They're separate stories, separate sources, separate timelines. But it's worth noting what these reports, taken together, suggest about William's role in this family right now. In both cases, he's reportedly the one stepping in when tensions rise around jewelry, protocol, and who gets to shine. If Kate really did feel Camilla's disapproval over that banquet tiara, there's no public reporting that William confronted his stepmother directly over it. That part of the story stays contained between Kate and Camilla, at least according to what's been published. But the wedding tiara dispute shows a different William entirely, one willing to go head-to-head with Camilla in a very public, very direct way when he feels she's overstepped a line he considers unfair. So maybe it's less about William picking sides between Kate and Camilla, and more about William drawing a boundary around what he personally believes is fair, whether that's his wife's right to wear whatever tiara she chooses without side-eye from across the room, or his cousin's bride having equal access to the family jewels regardless of how close her connection to the monarchy actually is. Either way, insiders suggest Camilla isn't taking any of it well, and that she sees these moments less as isolated incidents and more as a pattern of her decisions being second-guessed. And that brings us to the real question hanging over this entire saga. With the queen consort reportedly feeling boxed in on multiple fronts, and a future king reportedly willing to challenge her openly when he thinks she's wrong, what happens the next time these two clash? What comes next? None of this has been confirmed by the palace, and it's worth repeating that both of these stories originate from anonymous sourcing, Radar Online's insiders on one hand, and a Closer magazine source cited by IB Times UK on the other. Royal reporting like this often comes from people close to the family speaking without authorization, which means some of it could be exaggerated, taken out of context, or simply wrong. It's also worth remembering that stories like these tend to travel fast, precisely because they're juicy, not necessarily because they're airtight. So a healthy dose of skepticism is always the right move with this kind of reporting. But if there's even a kernel of truth here, it suggests a royal family navigating a real shift in power. Camilla has spent years building her position as queen consort, carefully managing her public image after a rocky start with the British public decades ago. Kate has spent the last couple of years fighting her way back into public life, and by most accounts, winning over the public in the process, arguably more decisively than at any point in her time as Princess of Wales. And William is standing right in the middle of it, reportedly willing to push back against his own stepmother when he thinks she's crossed a line, whether that line involves his wife's wardrobe or his cousin's wedding. If these reports have any basis in reality, they also highlight something that's easy to overlook about the modern monarchy. Public appearances may be carefully choreographed, but behind the scenes, every decision carries symbolic weight. Who stands where in a photograph, who hosts a major event, who receives the loudest applause, and even who wears which historic jewels can all become part of a much larger conversation about influence within the family. That's why stories like this attract so much attention. They tap into the belief that every seemingly small royal decision reflects a larger shift happening behind closed doors. For William, the timing is particularly interesting. As Prince of Wales and the future king, he's gradually taking on more responsibility and a more visible leadership role within the institution. Whether or not these specific claims are accurate, many royal observers have noted that he's increasingly seen as someone willing to make his own decisions rather than simply follow established traditions without question. If that perception continues to grow, then every reported disagreement involving William is likely to be viewed through the lens of a future monarch shaping the monarchy on his own terms. That alone could explain why even an alleged disagreement over tiaras has sparked such intense interest among royal watchers. It also says something about how these dynamics tend to play out behind palace walls in general. Royal family tension rarely gets announced. It gets filtered through unnamed sources, magazine insiders, and stories that surface months after the fact, once enough people have talked. Which means that even if every detail here isn't 100% accurate, the broader picture of simmering tension between generations of this family lines up with plenty of other reporting we've covered before. So the real question isn't whether one tiara feud happened. It's whether this is the new normal for how power gets negotiated inside Windsor Castle, quietly, tensely, and one royal jewel at a time. What do you think? Is this a genuine rift building beneath the surface, or just palace insiders stirring up drama for the headlines? We'll be keeping an eye on this one, because if these reports are even partly accurate, this almost certainly isn't the last time we hear about tension between these three. Royal jewelry has a way of becoming a proxy for much bigger family dynamics, and this doesn't feel like a story that's finished playing out. If you want us to keep tracking every twist in this royal saga, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update. And drop a comment below. Who do you think is really in the right here, Camilla or Kate? See you in the next one.